All advice given is for general information purposes. All legal cases are different, and you should seek the advice of your own attorney before acting or making decisions. No attorney-client privilege applies to communications on this show, and no attorney-client relationship is created by calling or writing in. Attorney Rominger practices only in Pennsylvania and maintains his primary office in Carlisle, Pennsylvania.
Hey, good afternoon. Carl Rominger here. Talk about all things legal. Of course, I'm sure you're out there cooking your hot dogs, flipping your hamburgers, doing all the things I'd like to be doing instead of cooped up here in the studio working with everybody else who's here for the holiday. But seriously, 540-0580. If you have a legal question, we'll get it taken care of here on the air. All kinds of topics. If we don't know the answer, we'll tell you that as well, or we'll point you in the right direction. And occasionally I'll take people off the air and help them find who they need. So 540-0580. If you have a custody situation, if you have a personal injury case, if you have a divorce question, just thinking about it, not sure which way to go with something, feel free to call in 540-0580. While I'm at it, we had Lisa Grayson on the show last week. She was talking a little bit about JAG, but she also was running for Register of Wills, and she won that election, so congratulations to her. Big thumbs up. In fact, she was not the endorsed candidate by the Cumberland County Republican Party, and she still took, I believe, over 70% of the vote, and I think that was based on her qualifications. 540-0580. Dave, what's going on?
Hey, I have a question about the Hatch Act.
Okay.
Talking about Cumberland County and East Pennsboro Township. A gentleman is a township commissioner, and he works for the Game Commission as an attorney. How can he do that?
Well, I don't think there's a conflict under the Hatch Act. I'm just trying to think this through. Is there federal money under his purview in either case?
I would think there's federal money that goes into the Fish and Game Commission.
Yeah, but in the Hatch Act decisions, and I'll just tell you this, I know in the Hatch Act decisions, this comes up a lot in district attorneys' offices.
Yeah.
When somebody's an assistant district attorney and they want to run for another office, they have to just make sure they don't assign them to cases that are funded with federal dollars. So it may be possible. That that's the bifurcation there.
Okay.
All right.
I just didn't understand that. He's active in many political sections, politics-wise, and yet he works for the state. I thought that state employees were prevented from doing other things other than school boards.
Yeah, but that's the Hatch Act is different than state issues, right?
Oh, okay.
Because the Hatch Act just affects things where federal employment.
All right. What about state issues then?
The state has the Ethics Commission, and we have some other laws that I, off the top of my head, can't quote for you, but I know you're right. There is some bar on political activity for certain types of employees and of certain types. But I'm not sure if municipal school board is different than township or not.
Well, municipal school board, it seemed to me that was the only thing that you were allowed to do if you were a state employee. And that's the question. So what I call the state ethics board?
Yeah, that's who you would talk to.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, good luck, brother. 540-0580. Mel.
Hello.
What's going on?
Hi, Carl. I got a question about wills. How long after a deceased person's will is given to an attorney do they have to send copies of the will to the people that are named in the will?
Well, it has to be probated. So when you say given to an attorney, if somebody walks into my office and hands me a will, I have no duty to do anything with it until they ask me to do something with it. Okay, So we'll start there. Number two, the client then says, I want to probate this will. And I should advise them, right? I'm going to say, you need to move this thing along. And I might say, by the way, you need to bring in the filing fee for the Register and Recorder's office, maybe $200 to open this estate. So at that point, I haven't done anything yet, right?
No.
So,
it's been a month and a half now, and nobody's heard anything.
Well, once they file the will, it should be filed of record. And once it's open, so has anybody opened it at the courthouse yet?
I don't know.
Well, it's a public record up there, so you can just go right up to the Register and Recorder of Wills, okay?
Right.
Or if it's
I know that.
And say, hey, did anybody file this will? And if it hasn't been filed yet, that might be the more interesting question, wouldn't it?
Yes.
And there might be a reason for that. Who knows?
I don't know.
We could just speculate.
My sister is one of the executors, but she's strangely quiet about anything.
Right. And if you're not named in the will, by the way, you're not going to get anything.
Oh, I know.
And what I mean by that is you're not going to get any notice of anything either.
No. But
so they may have probated the will, and maybe Dad or Mom wrote you out, and now you need to go up to the courthouse to figure that out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks a lot.
All right, brother. 540-0580. Just remember that, folks. When you have questions on, like, has a will been filed or what did the will say, you just go to the county where the person died, or I should say resided at the time of their death, and that's where it's going to be recorded. And it's a public record. You can see anybody's will. John, you're on WHP 580 with Carl Rominger. My talk line number is 540-0580. What's going on, John?
Hey, I have a landlord-tenant issue. By the way, it's a pleasure to speak with you.
Oh, thank you.
My sister recently was behind on her rent, and we advised her, of course, to get this taken care of. And then the landlord subsequently took her to court, and there's a judgment against her.
Right.
It's for a few $1,000s. Now, the landlord's been really cool about it. He hasn't, I guess, asked her to vacate because it's gone beyond the 10 days. That I guess you pay and vacate. I think is what was said, or pay and
stay.
Okay, so it's gone well beyond the 10 days, and she's been making regular payments to stay current, but still has that outstanding balance. I mean, can the landlord? This is what we're concerned about. Can the landlord come to her at any time and say, all right, you haven't paid all of your outstanding balance. We have nothing in writing that says that you're making payments on it. You need to leave.
Yeah, well, the landlord has sued her and gotten the judgment, the pay and stay judgment, right?
Right.
That the landlord's next remedy is to get the constable to come and serve her with notice.
Okay.
And the constable will serve her with an eviction, okay?
Okay.
Then she has a few more days to get herself out of there. But at any point up and until the time the constable kicks her out the door, she can pay and stay. I mean, she has to catch up that balance.
Okay. Well, like I said, he's been really cool about it. I don't foresee it happening as long as she kind of maintains the track that she's on. It's through no fault of her own, just a bad situation. But as long as she maintains the track that she's on, I believe that he'll let her stay. But if she falters, then perhaps we have another issue on our hands. So, all right, well, I thank you, and I appreciate it.
All right, no problem, my friend. Take care.
You too.
540-0580 is the talk line. If you have a legal question, get here on the air. We will answer them. Little holiday news here. 3 cited for bringing alcohol from Delaware into PA. This is sourced from ABC 27, and I'm a big fan of theirs. Westchester, PA. And of course, they've taken it from the AP. I'm a big fan of theirs, too. By the way, if you want to listen to some of their phone calls, just call the White House. They apparently record them these days. Liquor control authorities in southeastern Pennsylvania have cracked down on those trying to buy tax-free alcohol across the state line in Delaware. Police with the Pennsylvania Bureau of Liquor Control Enforcement conducted checkpoints Friday at 2 stores in Claymont, Delaware. Police with Pennsylvania... officers confiscated more than 400 bottles of beer and nearly 125 bottles of wine and 15 bottles of liquor. Now, how does that work? Checkpoint. First of all, we just talked about this the other day, but I'll talk about it again. You do not have to go through a checkpoint. We talked about this in the context of click it and ticket. So we'll talk about that when we come back from the break. I want to just touch on this a little bit and let you guys know. Number 2, you don't have to tell the police anything. If you got 4 bottles of wine in your trunk and the officer says, do you have anything in your trunk? You can say, I decline to answer your questions. That doesn't give him the right to get a warrant. Doesn't give him the right to open your trunk. You get to keep your wine and drink it later. See you after the break.
Let's return to Weekend Appointment with Carl Rominger on WHP 580.
Okay, welcome back. Carl Rominger here. So anyhow, what I was pointing out to you is you don't have to open your trunk. You don't have to tell the police what's in your car. You don't have to confess to crimes. And, of course, some people will be like, well, if you don't have any committing a crime, what are you going to complain? Well, they take 400 bottles of beer, a couple hundred bottles of wine off people. If somebody's shopping and they swing past the mall and they pick up a couple bottles of beer, I'm not going to fault them for failing to answer the police's question about what's in the trunk of their car or in the bags in the back. Of course, if you're smart and you're bootleg, I guess you don't just put it on the windshield dash. But anyhow, most people are probably intimidated. When the police pull you over, and we have this posted on our Facebook page, and it's at RomagerLaw.com, what things you have to do if the police tell you. You don't have to do much. You don't have to answer their questions. You can't lie to them, but you don't have to open your trunk or disclose the contents of your purse or empty your pockets or all kinds of things. So make sure you study up on your rights and exercise them frequently and often before we turn into a police state, which brings us up to this click it or ticket thing. They're now doing checkpoints for determining whether you're wearing your seatbelt or not. And, of course, we had a ton of feedback on the Rominger and Associates page on Facebook on this. Hundreds of likes and I think over 100 comments. So that's interesting to go read what people say, because they break down two ways. You've got our right-loving libertarians, and you've got our law and order safety Nazi types who are ready to give up all their rights. And so they go, well, it's a good thing because seatbelts save lives, and it's a good thing because I would never break the law anyhow, so I have nothing to hide. On the other hand, the libertarian point of view is once you start allowing the governments to do checkpoints for whatever reason they claim they're doing the checkpoint, you don't know why they're really doing the checkpoint. If Officer Friendly tells you it's a seatbelt, click it, or ticket, maybe it is. Or maybe he's also got directives to look for 5 other things while he's there. And maybe someday those criterion for the checkpoint are going to be something that you wouldn't support. But the law and order types always forget that, and I say law and order types, I mean the liberal big state types. Oh, yeah, sometimes the guys who think that they're Republican conservatives who are law and order are really actually big government types, too, because they're all about government intrusion. They just forget that. That could be one of you guys out there listening right now, and I hope that offends you, because you need to rethink your position. You know, there's this theory that Democrats are soft on crime and Republicans are tough on crime. I like to say that you need to be tough on liberty, and what I mean by that is hold the line on our liberty, hold the line on your liberty. Keep government at bay. Don't let it continue to grow. Don't let its power continue to creep as it has been. Ever since the revolution, we've been losing rights, one after the other. History is replete with it. 540-0580 will get you here on the air. Call in with your legal questions. If you've been in a divorce, your neighbor's fence is on your yard, you're having any issues whatsoever, we'll be happy to talk to you about them on the air. We're going to be answering questions live until 3 o'clock, so feel free to... like I say, call 540-0580. What else do we have in the news? I had seen, let's see here, I had a pretty good one here. The U.S. Supreme Court is going to be hearing a case about student interrogation without parental consent. And the idea is that in 2003, an armed uniformed county sheriff with an Oregon Department of Human Service caseworker directed school officials at an elementary school to summons a 9-year-old girl for questioning. Despite the absence of a court order or involvement of judge, school officials called SG out of her class, took her to an empty conference room and let her alone with the sheriff and the social service investigator. Then, without notifying SG's mother and in the absence of anyone who might otherwise have looked out for the little girl's best interest, these men proceeded to question her for 2 hours. During the course of the interrogation, the social worker peppered the child with questions about her father ever abused her or little sister. When the 9-year-old girl asked her father touched her all over her body, she said yes, referring to affection, hugs, kisses, and piggyback rides. Camera then asked over and over again if some of those were bad touches. And over again, the little girl said no. Obviously intimidated by 2 men, one of whom was wearing a gun, clearly visible. The girl, too, was frightened to ask for a glass of water to tell the men that she fell ill. At no time she told she refused to answer the questions, that she was free to leave the room on her own volition. The Obama administration, by the way, in their brief said it was a minor intrusion of liberty of the child. His freedom of movement is already considerably restricted by virtue of her presence at school. As the interrogation dragged on, SG continued to deny their father ever abused her. Yet once school buses started arriving to take her classmates home, SG found herself overcome with fear that she would be left behind. At that point, SG says she decided to lie and say whatever the men asked just to get out of the room. Upon returning home, SG was further traumatized to find the same 2 men in her house questioning her mother. This kind of left the little girl feeling nauseous, and she vomited 5 times and was unable to eat dinner. Despite the fact that Alfred had a tape recording with him, no recording or documentation of the questions asked SG during the 2-hour interrogation exists. Nevertheless, based on the counting of the 2 men and despite SG's repeated denials of abuse by her father, SG and her sister were subsequently removed from her parents' care and placed in foster care for 3 weeks. Eventually returned to their mother's care after physical examinations failed to uncover any evidence. Charges against the father were subsequently dropped. And this case is going forward to see whether or not authorities have the right to do this kind of thing. And they do it. And the tape recorder part, by the way, if you're ever on a jury, I want everyone out there to think about this. If you're ever on a jury and a police officer says he sat down and interviewed somebody and they don't have a recording of it, there's a reason why they don't have a recording of it. They don't want you on the jury to hear the actual conversation. They don't want you to hear the questions asked. Maybe the officer wants to come in and be technically true about what was said, but take it out of context. Maybe he wants to lie. Maybe the officer just doesn't want you to know, because a defense attorney might point out, listen to how he's screaming at my client. Maybe that's why he tripped up and said what he said. Or look at how confusing these questions were that were actually asked, and that the answers, if you really sort things out, aren't commensurate with guilt. But why don't police officers record interviews? I want you to think about that. If you're ever on a jury and the police haven't recorded the interview and they come in and claim, in this day and age when everyone's cell phone is a smartphone, everyone's cell phone has a voice recorder on it if you want to turn it on. Every police department could have a tape recorder. Every police department should have a video camera in those rooms. Some states have mandated that all interviews be done on tape and videotape so that juries can find out what really happened. Point is, if you're ever on a jury and they offer a confession or story, you should find discreditable those explanations where somebody says, oh, well, it's not departmental policy to tape. Oh, they tape when they think it's to their advantage, trust me. Or we didn't have a tape recorder handy. Or I just didn't have time to get the tape recorder. This is a big problem. Lots of innocent people end up in jail because of bad confessions, misinformation, and these recordings would solve that problem. And I just brought that up in the context of that case because it's something that personally bothers me a lot when I see it in court. One time, I had a state police tape, which was 45 minutes long with video, and it was going to show what they did roadside to my guy. And eventually, at the end of 45 minutes, he did consent to the search of his car, but he had a pretty interesting story about how that went down. And when we got to court, they said, oh, we lost the video. It was destroyed. But that we salvaged from the file the audio portion, not the 45 minutes of audio, just a minute and a half of audio at the very end when my guy said, yes, they could search the car. Credible? I don't know. Rich, you're on WHP 580 with Carl Rominger. You got a homeowners association question?
Yeah, our homeowners association bylaws, they basically say, you can't have sheds, you can't have certain type of fences and stuff like that. I guess my question is, what can they actually do? I'm actually on the board of the homeowners association,
right?
And I don't even really know what we could do if somebody did it. Maybe put a lien against the house or something.
Yeah, you can actually and eventually get a court order to force the removal of it.
Okay. So it's not like if I just wanted to say, like, screw you, I'm just going to put it up and say I'm not part of the homeowners association anymore. I couldn't do that.
Now you're stuck because when you signed the deed, you covenanted to be a member of the homeowners association and abide by its rules and bylaws.
Okay. All right.
And keep in mind, homeowners associations are interesting creatures because everybody's upset about theirs. Okay?
Right. Yeah, that's how it seems like. Yeah.
On the other hand, without them, values can be greatly affected. Okay?
Right.
And so, while everybody has little things that they want to do, when you have a community like that and everybody can do whatever they want, sometimes things fall into disarray. Sometimes people put up kitsy things. Sometimes people just don't maintain things. And if you're in a homeowners association which involves townhomes or condominiums, then there's joint maintenance issues that have to be managed as well. So,
Okay.
so they perform important functions. And a person coming to buy a lot of times does want to see a strong homeowners association. In other words, a guy living there, and I'll explain it this way, okay? When you're out looking for a date, right, you get all spiffed up and dressed up, and you want to look good and smell good and tie your tie and, make your shoes shine, all that sort of thing. But when you're already in a marriage, you're just going to let your belly hang out of your T-shirt, okay? and what happens is, once you're in the homeowners association, living there for a while, hey, what if I leave my garbage can out there a couple extra days? I don't care. Or if I park 2 pickup trucks sideways in the driveway, why should anybody care? But my point is, it's sort of like I'm here, I don't care, but it's that homeowners association, it's the beauty of the thing that sort of attracted you in the first instance, and you got to remember that's what's going to help you sell your house later.
All right, okay.
All right?
Gotcha, yeah, thanks, man.
All right, man. Oh, boy. Homeowners associations are always like that. Dee, you got a question about reverse mortgages.
Yes. I wanted to get enough money for my grandson for a car, and he wanted me to sign for a loan for him. But I understand my home is paid for completely.
Right.
And I understand that I was not allowed. Oh, Yes, it would be a lien against my home, but that would be only if he did not pay the loan or got in an accident. Would you explain that for me, please?
Okay. If you borrow money and they secure it against your home, then if he doesn't make the payments, you'll be personally responsible for that. And if you can't make the payments and he's not making the payments, then they can foreclose on your house.
But what if I get a reverse mortgage on my home that's already been paid for years?
Well, reverse mortgage is going to pay you monthly an amount of money, not a lump sum.
Both. A lump sum. That's my decision, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely your decision. And you shouldn't feel pressured into making a bad financial transaction. What kind of car is this grandson trying to secure?
He's trying to secure an older car that he can drive back and forth to the Hershey Hotel where he's a chef.
Okay.
And but I've been told when I called, oh no, don't do that. You can put a lien against your home.
The cheapest way, by the way, to do this, I mean, that I can think of off the top of my head, would be to go to your bank and ask about a home equity line of credit, okay?
Oh, yeah.
Because it's not fancy. It's going to be a low monthly payment with current interest rates.
Then what about the insurance?
Well, the insurance on his car?
Yeah.
Well, he must be making some money.
Oh, he is.
So he should be paying that, right?
Well, sure, but I don't know. He's just getting started. He just turned 20 this month, and if
you're going to buy the car outright, what you really should do.
No, I'm not doing any of that.
Right. I was going to say if you were buying the car, I'm saying if you're putting all the money into it, you should be the second named insured, and you should be on the title as the creditor.
See, that's what I don't think I should do.
Yeah.
Then they could take my home.
Well, anytime you but even anything you do, you're going to put yourself at risk there, okay?
I still would like to know, if I had reverse mortgage, I could take care of all these things because I have other things that I want to do in my home.
Right. Well, a reverse mortgage is really generally where you just get a monthly payment, okay?
Yes, or a lump sum.
Or sometimes a lump sum, yeah. But you could also just get a home equity line with a servicing amount that's in your budget too.
Yeah. Well, say I'm an elderly person. I have an attorney that was out of town, but her people that was talking to me about it said, oh, no, don't do that whatsoever. Let him ride a bike. Now, that was silly.
Yeah, but it's good legal advice. It might not be good grandmother advice, but it's good legal advice. And a lot of times, I've had a lot of times over the years where grandmothers, grandfathers, parents have been very disappointed that the kid or grandkid or niece or nephew didn't make the obligations that they agreed to at the time they lent them the money.
The courts of Pennsylvania years ago gave me custody of him, but of course now he's 20, and
so you're like mom.
Yeah, I feel like mom.
Yeah, you're mom. Okay. Well, here's the deal. It's a personal decision whether to help him out or not. And the question you have to ask yourself is he responsible enough? And number two, does he have his driver's license?
Oh, yeah. He just got out of Johnson Wales College.
Good.
And they hired him at Hotel Hershey.
Yeah, so my advice to you would be, don't be scared to do it if you think he's responsible and he will follow through. But at the same time, maybe guide him towards, you may want a $5,000 car, but why don't we start with a $2,000 car and you work your little kutzas
It's all for $4,000, and he pleaded, and now he's not talking to me,
I don't know.
I'm so hurt.
I'm not liking that.
Well, he thought I would not refuse him. He said, how am I to get back and forth to work? The chef said, work on that car, and because you riding back and forth is dangerous on a bike, and he never rode a bike in his life.
Well, it's a great time of year to ride on a bike so he could save up his pennies through the summer and buy a car in the fall.
Yes, you're right.
All right?
You're right.
I got to go to break, Dee.
Could I make an appointment then later if I need to talk to
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
All right, take care.
Thank you so very much. Be safe.
I will. 540-0580. See you after the break.
Let's return to Weekend Appointment with Carl Rominger on WHP 580.
Okay, because we are always working 5 types of media at the same time here, Steve just posted on Facebook about bringing liquor across state lines. Since the Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution seems to have been used to justify just about everything, how has PA been permitted to enforce this law? Good question. The answer is the 21st Amendment, which repealed prohibition, said in Section 2, the transportation or importation into any state, territory, or possessions of the United States for delivery or use therein of intoxicating liquors in violation of the laws thereof is hereby prohibited. So the Constitution, as amended, has been held by the courts to have basically eviscerated the Commerce Clause as it applies to alcohol and alcohol alone. Interestingly, up until very recently, I say very recently, about 20 years ago, people also thought that the 21st Amendment trumped all the other constitutional amendments, but in 44 Liquor Mart versus Rhode Island, the Supreme Court of the United States said, nope, you can't restrict advertising under the 21st Amendment. The First Amendment still applies. It's just the Commerce Clause that got eviscerated, and that the other rights were still there. Mike, you're on WHP 580 with Carl Rominger. You got a question about the Human Relations Commission?
Yeah, what do you think of the Human Relations Commission? Because I submitted a claim. I don't want to get too specific because it's still, it's still in the process of being taken care of and everything. What do you think of the Human Relations Commission? Do they actually do anything, or are they just an ineffective agency, bureaucracy?
I'll tell you what, actually, because I'm probably skeptical. I've been over a number of times, and I've always found that the investigators do a pretty thorough job. Not that everybody's always happy about the result or that I'd always agree with their determinations, okay? But I think there is a difference between doing a thorough job and agreeing with somebody, if that makes sense.
Well, who makes the decision as to whether, because it doesn't go to a judge in a court or anything?
It goes to an investigator who then makes a determination about probable cause. And if they grant probable cause, then the commission itself will actually, hold an inquiry into the matter. Your damages there are a little different than what you can get in court. But on the other hand, if the commission finds probable cause, there's going to be a heavy burden on the other person eventually to defend themselves. So I think it's effectual. I think it's a good resolution a lot of times. I just counsel somebody to settle one.
Oh, okay. Well, I got laid off from my job, and I thought it was unfairly laid off. That's all I want to say about it, because I submitted a claim with them. And so, what do you think I can maybe possibly get out of it?
Well,
nothing.
I know. Yeah, it can be anything from nothing all the way up to some portion of wages. The way they look at things, and I think it's very sensical, the commission won't just let you go, oh my gosh, I was wrongly discharged and now I can never work again.
Right.
It's not like a runaway jury in a crazy labor case, right? They're going to say, okay, what's fair? And they're going to look at what efforts you've made also to seek reemployment. It doesn't mean that they're going to skin you for it, but they're not going to let you just sit on your hands, if that makes sense. So they look at what kind of wages you lost, what kind of actual damages you had. They don't give pain and suffering.
Well, I'm at a late age in my life, and it's hard for me to get back into the employment market because I've been trying for months, and it seems like no one's interested in the older person. That's kind of discrimination right there. So, but that's all I want to say. I don't want to get too specific.
Yeah, and the other option is if they give you, after you've been with them for a while, if you watch your statute of limitations, you may want to consult with a lawyer because you may be able to bring the case outside the context of the Human Relations Commission. But frankly, I recommend that is a very positive way of getting to the bottom of things and resolving the dispute. I can think of a case where a woman thought she was fired because she was a woman, and that the guy hated women, right?
Right.
And the defense was, here's a file of employee complaints. There are 45 employees over the last 10 years who have taken the time to write HR to complain about this manager. Half women, half men.
Right.
Who all say he's an idiot, a jerk, a loudmouth, and otherwise terrible human being. But it appears that he applies it equally to men and women.
Right.
And then that sort of put, my client said, I always thought it was because I was a woman. And it turns out it's just because you caught his radar, whether you're a man. So there's no claim there any longer. So it's a good way to resolve it because the state went out and gathered all that information from the employer and then kind of put it all together for this little conference, and that's what solved it.
Right. Okay. That's all I needed to know.
All right, boss. Good luck.
Okay, right. Goodbye.
540-0580. Ron, you want to talk about Homeowners Association?
Hello, Carl.
Yeah.
Hey, how are you today?
Good.
Always enjoy your show when I get a chance to listen to it.
Thank you very much.
When you substitute for Bob.
I always enjoy doing that because I get to talk about just about anything, right?
Oh, I know. I call you every once in a while. But at any rate, the person called a little while ago about homeowner association.
Yes.
I have a little story. I used to live in Southern California, and there was a house there. I hope I didn't tell you this story before. but there's a house there, and this is back in the 80s. And this is an immigrant gentleman, a businessman, lived there. And it was probably comparable to about a $700,000 or $800,000 house here in central Pennsylvania. So it was a pretty nice house, And anyway, he looked around, and he wanted to be a good citizen. He had a good business. He had employees, and he wanted to do things the right way. And he felt like he needed to paint his house. So he looked around at all the neighbors. He hired a contract painter. He says, I want you to match the paint on my neighbor's house.
Okay.
So they did. Unfortunately, in their with a homeowner's covenant or whatever it is, the rule,
right,
it said they had to use a certain brand of paint.
Ah.
And so they somebody in part of the board or whatever, they decided to basically take him to court about it because he'd already had it painted, and it made the news. And what really brought it to the news, he was really upset about it, and he was trying to resolve it, negotiate with them. They just didn't want to listen, For some, I think, it almost appeared they didn't like him because of who he was,
right,
whether personality or nationality. Nobody really knew, but at any rate, so in protest, he painted his house red, white, and blue. Brought the same contractor in, and there was so much traffic up there for about a month. They had to have police every evening, almost 12-hour days, directing traffic.
That's
really
funny.
I don't know how it was resolved. I ended up moving away, but
well, and I got to go to break here, so I'll keep it quick. But freedom of contract is the freedom of contract. But people don't understand when they get into these planned developments with homeowners association agreements or condo places, they just. And I've done these closings, okay? Because we do real estate closings, and people call me up and say, my realtor is going to be so-and-so, and would you do my closing and title insurance? And I say, sure, So we sit there, and I always say to them, like, now you look at this. Have you read this? Do you know what this is? No, I'm not worried about that. That's some kind of homeowners association agreement. I'm like, well, you understand, if it says in there, that you can't drive a pickup truck or wear a cowboy hat, it may be applied to you. Oh, yeah, they'll. And so I find that most of the buyers really have no idea. And the realtors will tell you the same thing, which is you try to tell people about it, but they're so excited about the house and the community looks nice, and they just forget that there might be a lot of micromanagement in there, which will be things that they don't think are great.
Right. I think the key is join the board.
Join the board, right. Right, and I'll tell you that. I mean, that's another thing. Like, here's a big question in homeowners associations: how many of the houses should be rentals, if any?
Yeah.
Some people want rentals because it gives them flexibility, but the numbers show us that once a homeowners association tips into too many rentals, it can push the value down.
Yeah, they don't take care of it the same.
Yeah, but sort of like a rental car. You can rev that thing up the hill and you can fishtail it around, and it doesn't matter how hard you are on it.
Right.
All right, my friend.
Thank you.
Let's return to Weekend Appointment with Carl Rominger on WHP 580.
Hey, welcome back. Carl Rominger here. Somebody else want to know, what's the charge for bringing booze back into PA? It's called bootlegging. Another one they get people on is cigarettes. You smokers might be aware of this, right? Go down to Virginia and or somewhere in the South and buy 50 cartons of cigarettes and get caught driving into Pennsylvania with them, and all suddenly they're going to skin them off because they don't have the tax stamps on them. Or you can go back up to my neck of the woods where I grew up, to the Salamanca Indian Reservation, and get the cigarettes and cheap gas. Of course, the gas pumps are always lacking that little seal of integrity that tells you that it had been tested recently, because they were exempt from weight and measures as well, but it was a lot cheaper, so that's what people did. And even to this day, you can go to the reservation. Of course, the New York State Troopers quite often set up near the reservation to hand out flyers reminding you that you're stealing from the state of New York by not purchasing your gas and cigarettes in the state of New York, and you're a bad, bad citizen. I had somebody also charged one time with frequenting a speakeasy. Some really clever guy in downtown Harrisburg decided to put an ad in the newspaper advertising a bar in his basement. And the police waited till about midnight when there was 40 dum-dums down there drinking beer and something at some guy's homemade bar, which makes no sense. But anyhow, and they charged them all with frequenting a speakeasy. And that was the first time I'd seen the charge, the judge had seen the charge, and the prosecutor had seen the charge. I guess the police had done their homework. Tom, you're on WHP 580 with Carl Rominger. What's going on? Tom.
Oh, yes. Carl, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, sorry about that.
How's it going?
Got a quick question for you. I got a ticket back in February down in Maryland I went down to pay it, and when I went down to pay it, they told me that I had 3 tickets that I'd never paid from back in '06. Now, yeah, so I don't really remember those tickets from '06. They weren't very big tickets, we're talking like less than $200 for all 3 of them. They were small things, but, when I was pulled over back in February, they ran my license and everything came back good. In Pennsylvania, my license is good where I'm up here. So is this something I should, concern myself with? Should I go down and pay it or just let it go?
Well, where are these tickets out of?
It was somewhere in Maryland is where they said that I got those tickets.
Okay.
But I don't.
Well, eventually you're going to be driving through Maryland and they're going to pick you up on a warrant, right?
Well, from '06, how long do they wait on that?
Yeah, they can last forever. I've had so my advice is do something to straighten them up.
Okay.
Because they're going to catch up with you at some point, maybe never. Okay, but think of it as insurance.
Okay.
You decide you need to get to Washington D.C. because the president has summoned you to caucus on something, and you're going to get pulled over in Silver Spring and locked in the pokey, and you're going to miss your big meeting. All right.
All right. Well, that's what I need to know. And does Maryland and Pennsylvania talk back and forth about that kind of stuff?
They do, kind of, yes. But some of the older, it's hard to say. But if they do put a warrant out for you and they'll put it in the system, a lot of times they'll put "do not extradite" next to it. Okay, which means don't bring them in from another state because we're not coming to pick them up over something that's minor. So then it just sits there like a ticking time bomb because it just every time you go into the state of Maryland. So I knew a guy that had gotten a summary style charge up in Canada, and he just skipped the court date because they wouldn't bring him across the border. But as a result, up there, they had like 7 years, and then the thing goes away because it was like a summary type citation. That was their rule. So for 7 years, the guy was scared to death to go into Canada. And, of course, when you live up in the Buffalo, New York area, people are scared to death of going into Canada, can't go half the places people want to go.
Yeah.
Particularly the fine establishments of Fort Erie. All right, my friend.
All right, thanks.
540-0580. Carl, you're on with Carl. Hey, Carl.
Carl?
Yep.
Oh, this is Carl. I have a question to ask you, but I got to be kind of vague because I don't want anyone to recognize this. It's through a lawyer. I have a lawyer. They have lawyers.
So be vague. Be general.
All right, I'll try.
Do what everyone else says. Tell me you have a friend.
I got a friend, whatever. But this property is was built on, and the building permit was obtained, and they're claiming that adverse possession, they own the property. They went up to the tax office and had their name put on, so they're getting taxed for the property, and this friend is getting taxed for the property.
Okay.
And supposedly it's been with a lawyer for 5 or 6 years, and he doesn't seem to be able to do anything. And I was wondering possibly what may be your advice on how to handle this, and because where it stems from, there's other problems with that property because with the deed, it's not clear meets and bounds.
Right. So is there actual litigation filed yet?
No. He said that his lawyer doesn't want to take him to court. It'll cost him large amounts of money.
Right. So, well, and that's the question. So, without reviewing the file and seeing where everything's at, it would be hard for me to speculate as to where it's at.
Okay. I mean, I would talk a little bit more clear privately. But
right. So, and to get hold of our office, you go to romingerlaw.com, and you can look up our phone number there, or I can just give it to you right now.
All right. Well, what I'm saying is, then I'll get that person will get an astronomical fee for you to restudy the case, correct?
Potentially, but not. But depends. I mean, I just don't know. I just don't know how much is there. I mean, right now I'm engaged in some land use litigation, and it's not rocket science to look things over and say here's what we can or can't do. but actually going to court is going to cost money, yeah.
Yeah. But so does having a lawyer for 5 or 7 years.
Yeah, I can imagine. And that seems like a long time for nothing to happen. So,
well, that's what I was wondering. This person says, take it to court, and this lawyer says,
sounds like it's time to get a second consultation to see what's going on. I go to break, brother. 540-0580. Debbie and Chris, hang on. I'll talk to you guys in the next hour. I'll be here for another hour till 3 o'clock answering your legal questions live. So go flip your burgers, and I'll see you in a few minutes.